In this video I'm going to be stripping this engine down. It's a KTM 85SX and from 03 up to a 2011 all the parts are the same. So if you had 04, these parts will fit onto an O-level 2011 engine. And here we're going to start stripping it down anyway. Get the gear stick off first. That's the gear stick off. Now we're going to take the cylinder head off, loosen that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, in a sequence. Don't just loosen one and then loosen another, you've got to go in a sequence. So we'll get these off and then lift the head off. So that's all the bolt slack. It's best to slacken your spark plug as well while the engine's complete, because if it's still in the head and it isn't slackened, sometimes they're hard to get off. You will lift the head off. See what it's like. That's the head. So put that to one side. So now we'll get the barrel off the cylinder. Once you take this case off, what I've already took off, just pop that bar back for the power valve and then that will lift off. So just pop that back now. It just pops off like that, off that little runner what controls the power valve. Now I'll take these 4 bolts at the base of the cylinder off and we'll lift the barrel off. So that's the 4 10mm off the bottom of the cylinder. So now just lift it off. There's the barrel. We'll look at the crank in a minute. The lad I got it off says it had just had the crank been rebuilt, plus the full engine. You can see all the gaskets are new, but I'll show the damage underneath the engine. That's why I'm stripping it. Crank does look new. You normally tell the more copper colour the conrod is, the newer the rebuild is. When you pull the piston up and down to check this bottom bearing, there's no movement up and down, so the crank bearing's good. So we'll get the piston off, just put a pick in there, just pop that little pin out. Normally I'd put a rag in there so you don't drop your circlip down, but this engine isn't going back together, so it doesn't matter if I drop that down. That's the piston pin out. There's the little end bearings. There's the piston. There's the arrow. That always faces the exhaust port. If you're ever doing a bike with a piston and it hasn't got the arrow pointing forward, just remember that where your piston rings line up on that little groove. If there's had 2 rings, there'd be a groove here for the other ring. Them nip up on the back, so they're not nipping on the exhaust port, because this is where your exhaust port are. So like I say, if there's never ever a pointer facing forward and you're wondering which way the piston goes, just remember the 2 little notches. There's one of them. Always at the back of the piston towards the cob. So that's the piston. There's the power valve. The more you rev it, that goes up and opens the power valve in there. So as that's going up, you'll see up the exhaust port. So that's going up, it opens up, and that's fully open when it's all flush. And then when you let the revs off, that'll drop, and your valve will be shut like that. And it opens, shuts. Anyway, that's that. Now we're going to get the flywheel off. But I'm going to show a way how to do it without doing this. Most people put something in there with 2 chunks of wood here, so it locks your conrod. Then they can take the flywheel nut off because it's locked by there, and they can take the primary drive nut off as well in here. because this is locked, but that's putting, because these are on tight, these two nuts, that's putting tension on your bottom end bearing down there. So I'll show a better way to do it without even needing a holding tool for your flywheel. So we'll do that now. So we want to be taking the clutch side casing off first, but I'll just show it's been rebuilt before I got it, and like there's bolts that long, look, sticking through there, and then there's everything's mismatched. Actually, everything's mismatched anyway. And under the engine, I put this putty stuff on, but under there, when I got it back to see the oil leak, I went to loosen a bolt, and it wasn't even loose, tight. It was just loose, but it wouldn't tighten up. So when I pulled it with a screwdriver, it had loads of blue gasket sealer pushed on the end of the nut and nipped together, and that's why I'm stripping it, because it's leaking oil out of there, and I don't know what damage is to the casing where that bolt snapped, but I'll sharp see once I get everything split. Anyway, we'll get the clutch side off first now. Kickstart I've already slackened. We'll just pull it straight off. There's the kickstart. So now we'll get this clutch casing off and the clutch outer casing. We'll get the water pump casing off as well. That's the clutch casing off. That's the outer clutch. That's the water pump casing off. Now it's best to get the little impeller off now while it's all together, because the cog on the back of the impeller is all locked up still with the clutch and everything. It's just if you pull it off, this is still attached, and you've got to put a holder onto the cog on the back to hold this while you get this nut off. Anyway, it turns anti-clockwise just like a normal bolt. So we'll screw that off and pull the impeller off, and then we'll get these bolts off around the casing and take the clutch side off. And that's the little impeller nut off. It's hard to get off at the minute, but it'll come off once I take the casings. Just at least that's off now. So we'll get this casing off. So that's all the bolts out the casing now. Just keep your finger on the kickstart shaft as well as you're pulling these cases off. That's that off. There's the power valve stick. What runs off this? That's just the power valve governor. Now, because I took that nut off on the water pump shaft, this should just lift up. There's the impeller. I'll just pull out. Goes on like that. You can see it's got a flat edge. So the flat edge lines up with a flat edge on the impeller. Just push it in and just put that little nut back in. Just keep that in there for safekeeping. And when you're doing water pumps, check these teeth, because if any of these are missing, if say them two teeth are missing, when it runs off this primary drive cog here, if there's two teeth missing, this primary drive will be turning, but the two teeth what's missing won't be engaging this water pump, so your bike will seize up. So always check them when you're doing bike rebuilds or anything. It's important that. So now we're going to get the flywheel off, and that's why I took this off first, and I'm not taking nothing more of the clutch, because you get a penny which is softer metal than these. Don't wedge your screwdriver in, then you wedge it down there or underneath. It depends which way the nut's coming off, but I'll show that in a minute. But you wedge it in there on the clutch basket and the primary drive, then you can get the primary drive nut off and the flywheel nut off without putting no tension, as I showed before, on your conrod bearing at the bottom. So get this casing off. That's the casing off. You can see how you can get to the stator and adjust it without even moving the flywheel, because when you rebuild them, when the piston's on the cylinder, you've got to get a decking tool and put the decking tool in. Goes in two ways. before you set the stator up. I've done a KTM 65SX and I had to use the decking tool for that. So if you go back and look at my KTM videos, you'll see it. But anyway, like I say, we're going to put a penny into the clutch and the primary drive nut just to lock this, so I can get that nut straight off. And it comes off counterclockwise. So you get the penny and put the penny underneath the primary drive and the back of the clutch. And if you see there, it locks it, because the penny's softer metal than this, it doesn't damage it. Don't wedge a screwdriver in to keep it tight. When that penny's in there, the flywheel's locked now. So we're just going to keep hold of the clutch because the penny's in. Get the tool on there, the windy, and just take it straight off. The nut off with the penny. You can see where the penny's chewed up. That's how tight these nuts are on. So there's been no, like I said earlier, there's been no tension on your crank thingy, on your conrod. So that's that nut. Get the flywheel off next. I'll put the puller in. That's which flywheel puller you need. It's got two ends on. You can take this bolt out and swap it around, but that ends for this flywheel. So when you screw it in, you screw it in that way, counterclockwise. Just get it in as far as you can. And when it's in, put span around there and just tighten this and it'll come off. Spanner on. That's the flywheel off. All good inside. And I like to always put that nut on there just to protect the threads, because they're dead fine them. So just put that nut back on. Now we'll take the stator off. Like I said before, some stators have got a line here and a line there what matches up to set the timing. Like I see on these, you can turn this stator to adjust it while the flywheel's still on, untightened. Because you've got to get, like I say, you've got to get the piston at the right height. If it doesn't hit the decking tool properly, you've got to put a couple of different size base gaskets on, so it lifts the piston, lifts the barrel up, so it matches the tool. It's complicated, but like I say, it's in one of my KTM 65 videos, so we'll get this off. So we'll pull the stator off, got the bolts out. That's the stator. So that's that on this side. I've already took the front sprocket off, but there's this bush in here, like most bikes. It's got a groove on this side. That side's flat. So when it goes in, it goes that side with the flat side out. Just if you're watching this video to tear down, you'll be able to build one back up by watching this video. And now we'll get the primary drive nut off as well with the penny. This comes off anti-clockwise as well. But on this one, you put the penny in the top of the cogs. For the flywheel, I had to put it in the bottom. So you put it in the top. You can see it there, it's locked it. And we'll just... That's the primary drive bolt out by locking it with a penny. So like I say, taking that nut out and that nut out once you're dead tight hasn't caused one bit of pressure on this conrod, doing it that way with a penny. Now I'll take these bolts out the clutch. Just do these in a crisscross as well. Do that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Just till they're off. And that's all the nuts out with the springs. Some of them are dropped down there. But that's your 5 springs and your 5 bolts. Just pull this front plate off. That's the front plate. Check for washers behind stuff like this. There's a washer there. I'll just leave it on actually. Then you've got that Have a little thrust bearing on there. Looks like a washer, it is, but it doesn't come off. You've got that part all in one, so that goes onto that. So we're going to get that nut off now, and we'll have to use the penny again. Just put the penny in there. It comes off anti-clockwise. So we'll put the penny in the top. No, so we'll put the penny in the bottom actually, and we'll get that off. So we'll put the penny in the bottom. That's the clutch centre nut off. That's it there. Now slide this out. Get in a basket with the plates and just check on the back. As you can see there, there's a little washer there. It's got a bit snapped off. That's one of those washers what go on. Then when you tighten that nut up, you bang the tab over, so it keeps the nut still. So that's what that is. But it's obviously broken. Always check on the back, as I've just showed before. And that other part we took off on the clutch for washers sticking on. There's another big washer. It goes on the back of there. Then we'll take the basket off. Check on the back basket as well for washers. It hasn't got one on. There's the basket. There's no play in it. It's got some grooves in, but you can file them down. There's a big bush there for the middle of the basket. And that might be a washer. I'll just have a check. So there's that big washer as well. That's how fat it is. So that one goes on first. There's the state of the penny. That's how tight them nuts is on. The primary drive should just slide off. It will be, it just goes on, it can go on anywhere, that way or that way. There'll be a woodruff key in the crank which is there. So we'll take the woodruff key out the crank, and then I'll be able to get that bush out. That's the woodruff key for the primary drive. It's the same as a flywheel woodruff key. It does look homemade, it's been grinded down and everything. See where it's been grinding that. Anyway, that's off. This bush should just slide out now. That's it, that's that bush gripped. There's the bush. You can just go in both ways. It's exactly the same. We'll put that nut back on there. Then we'll start taking this apart, get that off. This kickstart idler cog, the kickstart shaft, the gear shaft, and then we'll get the crank tool on to split the engine. So I'm going to start taking all this off. First off, just loosen this. That's where it's all stuck together. Get your circular pliers, and we'll get that little one off there. I'm going to see it'll be tensioned this when it comes off. Always check for them being level and flat. And always check this wheel, make sure it's round. So that's that. Gear shaft should just push through. Just pull that off. There's a little dowel pin in. What lines up with that dowel pin there? See, it might even come out if you pull it. Oh, it's stuck in. Anyway, the gear, there's the gear stick as well. The gear shaft. It's all working. I've got videos of the bike running on my YouTube, so I know there's nothing wrong with the gearbox anyway. So we'll get this kickstart idler cog off. Some idler cogs have a washer, then your idler cog, then a washer behind it, so always check behind as well. So there's a washer at the front, which is that fin. There's two on actually. So it had two washers on the front. That's what fits on the engine. That bit goes towards the engine. But I'll check and see if they're meant to have two washers on the front or not. I'll take the kickstart shaft off, which is just that 8mm up there. Just watch, because this spring will be tensioned as well. So when that nut comes out, the spring will probably go flying round, spin round. That's it off. There's that behind the spring going into that hole there. So that sits on there that way. With that bolt through into the hole, and the spring goes round there. That part of the spring, the hook. Anyway, this will just slide out. There's the kickstart shaft. It's all working. The clutch push rod, it's popped through that and come out as well. That's it there. So now I'll get all these 8mm case bolts out. And then we'll put the crank tool on there and pull this half off. That's all the case bolts out now. You can see the one where the bolt snapped there. So we'll get the crank tool and pull this case side off. That's the crank tool on. Now I'm going to split the cases. So just have it like that. I'm going to tighten this big bolt in here and it'll pull the case. Sometimes if they're tight, bang on the front sprocket shaft as well, but it's just come off dead easy anyway. Sometimes you have to bang the front, but the front's coming off easy. Split. That's that casing inside. So I've pulled that stuff off, and when I'm putting the bolt in now, it's tightening up properly. It's even pushing the stuff out the top what had the other bolt in. So I don't know, you can see bits dropping off the bolt, but like I say, the bolt was snapped and just pushed in, and that's where it was leaking oil. That's why I've stripped it for. I'll have a look at the other side. That's why. There's the snap bolt. You see, you get that out with more grips. I'll pull that putty off. So that's why it was leaking oil. That snap bolt there. Right, now we'll take the gears out. Just take the selector forks out first. You've got that one with a spring in each end. That's one spring. That's the other. They're just both the same size springs. Then we'll take this selector fork out. It will be longer. It's got a spring there. The other spring might have dropped out, but I'll check if that needs 2 springs. Anyway, that's that one. It's longer than the other one. Selector forks just dropped out. They're good. Once they're wear, that's when you kind of get your bike into gear. There's no wear marks on them. That's the little one from the centre. We'll take these 2 out. That's the top one. Got a bit wear. It's got some wear there as well. Take the bottom one out. That's the bottom one. It's not wear actually, it's just took the paint off, because the KTM 65 I'd done was like that, but these have all got notches in there. One of the notches has just dropped. There's the drum. The selector forks just run through that. When you change gear, they move up and down like that, and that's what lifts the gear stick cogs up and down. So now the gearbox should just pop out. We'll look for any washers. Yeah, that's it on there. See, there's a washer in the back in there, and there's a washer on the top there what come out. So that means it's had 2 washers on there. One's thinner than the other. The thinner one was on first, and then that one. There's no washers on the top. There's that cog as well off the bottom. But I'll make a video of how to set these cogs up, strip them and put which washers where. So that's that side of the gear shaft anyway, the gearbox. This side I just pull out, take the nut off. Let's check for washers again. There's none in there. There isn't one on the end. There isn't one on the end of there neither. So just put that bolt back on. This is the one the clutch went on this. The crank, if the crank doesn't pull out, I'll have to get the crank pusher tool on and just push the crank through. Normally I would just bang them, but the crank's still good, so I'll just get the proper tool on, push it through. And there's another spring dropped. So that does take 2 springs, and they're both the same size. There's the little one with the springs. That's the crank tool on this side now. Just going to tighten this big bolt in and it'll push the crank out. That's the crank out. That's the main bearing. There's no up and down play in it. So it has just been rebuilt, you can tell by the colour of the conrod. There's the casing. If I get that out with more grips, this casing will be alright. These 2 casings will be alright. I mean, anyway, that's it all stripped now, the engine. Thanks for watching. And there's this little O-ring as well, what I forgot to point out. Don't forget that. When this is fitted, your front spot goes on here, and you've got that big bush collar what I pulled out. So remember that goes on, and then the bush